This is I4CP Next Practices Weekly. If you are new to I4CP, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're a human capital research firm. We discover the people practices that drive high performance. We define high performance with four pretty standard business metrics: revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. So that's what we focus on in all of our research reports, surveys, and community conversations. We're a member-based organization. You see here just a small sample of some of the logos of membership organizations in our community. They range from very large companies like 3M, Microsoft, Amazon, many other brands here that you're very familiar with. We've got a lot of regional banks and healthcare operations in membership. We've got a growing cohort of unicorn companies as well. If you're with a member organization and with us today, special welcome to you. I know we've got a broad audience. If you haven't introduced yourself yet in the chat, please do so. I saw folks from all four corners of the US, folks from Canada, the UK, India, I now see as well. So nice global audience today. If you're not with a member organization but would like to learn more about what that entails, just visit us at i4cp.com. You can get more information from any I4CP employee if you just reach out. We'd be happy to tell you what's involved. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst here at I4CP, and most weeks I have the pleasure of co-hosting I4CP's Next Practices weekly events. I'll be bringing on a couple of my colleagues as my co-hosts and special guests today, but a few other quick announcements before I do that. We do have, as the name implies, sessions lined up for next week, the 16th and the 23rd, with leaders from McDonald's and U.S. Bank. I'm sorry, those dates are a little off. 23rd, McDonald's, 30th, U.S. Bank Corp. We've got a lineup of sessions lined up for February already as well, so we're starting the year strong in 2025. We're going to be covering today the priorities and predictions report that we come out with every year at this time. But I did want to note for your EMEA region colleagues, we'll be doing a similar webinar where my colleague Lorrie Lykins, who will be joining us here in just a few minutes, our managing editor and VP of research, will be joining John Sutton, our vice president of business development, to essentially be going through a lot of the same information, a lot of the same material from that 2025 priorities and predictions report. You see the times there for the London time zone, Dubai time zone, Paris, India, etc. So if you've got colleagues, if you're a global organization, have colleagues over in those time zones, feel free to please share the link to that. Zeta has put that over in the chat. Use the QR code as well, and by all means, ask them to join that webinar. Also wanted to note, we do 4 to 6 major studies a year, and we've got one that just launched and is live in the field now. The topic is leadership in the era of distributed work. You can use the QR code here on the screen or use the link over in the chat. We would love everyone on this call to please represent your organization. Do this survey. It takes about 15 minutes. This isn't your normal sort of run-of-the-mill leadership survey that many organizations, including I4CP, have done in the past. We're really honing in on one specific aspect of modern leadership, and that's, as the title implies, this new era of distributed work. This is something that we define as more broadly than just the issue that we covered last week here on Next Practices Weekly, sort of where work gets done, remote policy, hybrid, flexible work, return to office, and so on. By distributed work, we obviously do mean that, but we mean a lot more. We mean how work is distributed globally. It's distributed out into multiple project teams. It's distributed across different cultures. So we cover all of that in the survey, and we would love your input and participation. All right, with all of that taken care of, I'm going to now bring on my two colleagues and my two special guests today, Lorrie Lykins, our managing editor and vice president of research, and Mollie Lombardi, who, like me, is a senior research analyst here at I4CP. Good morning, Lorrie and Mollie. Good to have you.
Hi, Tom. Good to be here with everybody.
Good to be here.
Great to have you. So we're going to walk through the priorities and predictions report, and we've done this already for I4CP members. I think we also had a public webinar that really focused on the main 4 predictions primarily. We're going to cover those somewhat briefly and then hone in a little bit more on the different priorities from across our different boards. But before we get to all those specifics, Lorrie, could you take us through, what's the genesis of this every year? This is our biggest downloaded report every year. It's our most popular item most years. So can you tell us a little bit more background on it?
Sure, I'd love to. This is probably the most enjoyable project I work on every year, but every year in Q3, Q4, we send out a survey to the members of I4CP's boards. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us and what we do, we run all of the boards that you see here. They're C-level boards. And in the case of it not being a C-level position, it is the senior most leadership role in that particular functional area. So you see we have chief HR officers, chief leadership, talent and leadership development, but we also have the senior most executives who are leading, functions such as people analytics, talent acquisition, and total rewards. We've also launched this year Future of Work Board, which is doing some really fascinating work. But I think that what's most important to keep in mind about what we're going to share with you today is these are all insights that we received from the members of these boards. So there's about 150 senior executives who participated in this survey. And we asked them a series of questions, but it's primarily focused on what is it that you're working on in 2025? What are your strategic imperatives? Where are you going to be, focusing your resources, your time, your efforts? What is top of mind? So this is really, I think, great insight, sort of a peek behind the curtain in terms of what's going on in the C-suite. So the subtitle of this report is, C-suite perspectives. It really is, C-level perspectives. So what we're going to be doing today is reporting out to you what they shared with us. The other thing I want to mention is that these boards all meet throughout the year, both in person and virtually. So in addition to the insights that we got from the survey, we also meet each board in the fall in particular to talk about what is coming ahead. So there's also a lot of qualitative insight that's woven through this report that came from all of those meetings that we had in the fall.
Thank you for that, Lorrie. And I just want to, again, draw your attention, everyone, to the chat. That is your opportunity to interact with us today. And in particular, if you scroll up a little bit at this point, Zeta has put the download for the priority and predictions report for both members and non-members. This is one of the few pieces that we produce each year that's fully public and available. There's two different URLs to download it, but it is fully available to everyone. We do that every December, make it available. And you see that there are insights from some very recognizable brands that are sort of called out with some interesting quotes and everything. There'll be more detail. I mean, this is going to be a great conversation. I've been looking forward to this for weeks now with the two of you, and we're gonna hit on some of the key points, but definitely download the full report because you'll get even more by looking through that. All right, why don't we start with the top 4 predictions? We're going to quickly walk through all 4 of these. I'll just high level state the first one focused on AI. The second one on sort of building a skills-based organization. Third one on older workers as a key demographic in organizations. And the fourth one on DE&I. And we're going to sort of tag team on these 4. So why don't we first talk about that first prediction? And I think for that, we're going to go to Mollie.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And hey, everybody, we're so glad to have you here. As Lorrie and Tom have already said, this is a really great project we get to do every year. And even though the name of the report is Priorities and Predictions, we're going to start with our predictions here, which are based on I4CP's view of not only what our boards tell us, but all the conversations we have throughout the year with all of our members and out in the marketplace with solution providers, with other experts in the industry. So it's sort of shaped by what we're seeing and what you're seeing. So the first prediction is around operationalizing AI, that top companies will extend their lead by operationalizing, there we go, AI, while low-performing organizations sit on the sidelines. Now, we've been talking about AI for a long time now, at least 2.5 years for most of us. It's really been in the limelight. It's not the first, it won't be the last big change. So really, it's a lot of it is about change readiness. And we have new research coming out, I think any day now, on workforce readiness in the era of AI, how AI is going to influence how organizations get ready for the future and how they workforce plan for the future. But we found that 91% of the firms that say they've realized positive returns as a result of AI, 91% of those early adopters have seen some results. So they've seen things like efficiency, cost savings, and improved productivity. There's also some stats here that are kind of interesting. those who said the workforces are prepared for Gen AI were 52% more, 52 times more likely to have provided Gen AI training. Now, 52% 2 times more sounds like a lot, but only 1 or 2% of our respondents say they're ready for the future, but they have not offered training. So it's a little bit of you have to think through that. So if you provide training, you tend to be on the upper upper quartile of people who are adopting these AI skills. We also found that early adopters are 20 times more likely, which is again 61% versus 3, than those who have yet to adopt Gen AI to characterize their workforce as prepared to use the technology. So again, there's not a lot of organizations that say they're prepared for the future that have not offered training. So if you're not offering training yet, if you don't have those guidelines out there for appropriate use, it's time to really kick that into gear for your organization going forward. One thing that's also interesting is that employees at AI leading organizations believe that they could improve their productivity by 30% or more with additional training. So people who've gotten a taste of what AI can do for them are really hungry for more. So if you already are offering training, consider what roles might need more advanced training or what else you could be doing to support those individuals who see they can improve the productivity even more. There's also counterintuitive to that, which is also these organizations that have high adoption and have people who are willing to learn more. They're also saying that they are very aware and even a little bit worried about disruption of their jobs, or the fact that those jobs might be changing. So, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're afraid of it, but it's really important because a lot of the priorities we're seeing on AI are getting people to identify what parts of their job can be sort of dealt with through AI that will free up their time. It's really important to give people a construct to share those findings, but also not be afraid they're going to be losing their jobs to AI. So.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, that last finding, I'm glad you brought that up, even though it's not on the slide, Molly. That was one of the sort of initially counterintuitive findings from the study, and it just shows how powerful AI is. I like to use the example of when Steve Jobs first introduced the iPod. Most people didn't quite know why they would need it necessarily or what it was about until they started using it, and then they realized, wow, I can have 1,000 songs in my pocket. Same thing with AI. The people that start using it realize just how powerful it is, and then not surprisingly, they start to wonder, is this going to replace some of the tasks I do, or maybe my entire job? As opposed to those that aren't diving in at all, they don't even know what the power of it is truly going to be. All right,
Sort of
let's
like me
move
when I
on.
wondered why I never needed a phone in my camera. Right?
Right, yeah, carrying those two things merged together. All right, the second priority I'll tackle, and that is, or second prediction rather, until companies shift their cultures, efforts to scale skills-based marketplaces, becoming a skills-based organization, will really start to stall. And we're already seeing that with a lot of organizations. We have many member organizations that are on this journey of becoming a more skills-based organization in terms of their broad talent processes. But some of them are pulling back. They're pausing because they're seeing some difficulties in the organization because there's a big change management aspect that needs to come into play here, and some culture and mindset shifts. So a few numbers on this. The latest study, again, the workforce readiness in the era of AI study that Molly mentioned, that'll be coming out very soon. 43% of organizations report that their managers hoard talent, that they have a real problem there. That number, frankly, hasn't budged. We've done studies in 2016, 2021, and now 2024 that number is between 40 and 45% year after year. Another number here, 39% of organizations report it's easier for existing employees to find a job externally than internally. Some of that is the tech not being in place, but a lot of it is cultural. It's what the organizations are focusing on and encouraging in various ways. And one key point that we bring out in the report is that many companies continue to operate under a sort of traditional, very rigid job structure, as opposed to introducing a more project, or sometimes you hear the word gig structure, into the work environment. And that's the kind of cultural change that I think those companies that have been successful with skills-based processes, skills-based organization overall, and there are many who have gone down this path and already seen great results. It's often that kind of a shift that they've put into place. So we're anticipating that more and more companies will do that, and those that don't, as the headline says, will sort of stall in these efforts. All right, the third prediction here, why don't we go again back to you, Molly, on this one?
Yeah, this is interesting. Older workers will go from overlooked to overtly courted. And there's a lot of reasons for this. We've been hearing about demographics for a long time, but it's really going to start to show up in our workforces. We've actually saw that according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2022, people aged 65 plus accounted for 7% of labor force. That's expected to rise by 45% by 2030, which means close to 10% of our labor force is expected to be 65 and over. That means 1 in 10 people in your organizations could be 65 or older. So we have to prepare for that. And the AARP Public Policy Institute saw that by 2028, nearly 1 in 4 workers will be 55 or older. So it's really important to be thinking about this group. And again, with AI and things like that, you still need the human to filter the AI. I think that's one thing we've seen in a lot of the AI research. I'm sure a lot of you are seeing as well. AI is not a replacement for the human. It's an augmentation and a way to take off some of the routine tasks from individuals. But having those people have that experience and knowledge is going to be really important in the era of AI. We're seeing that the wealth of skills, experience, and institutional knowledge older workers possess is difficult to replace quickly. Tom was talking about training and skills-based training. Being able to partner experienced workers with younger workers is going to be a huge part of that as well. We're also seeing that despite advances in AI, the current skill gaps, including areas like healthcare and skilled trades, are making older workers essential. You know, again, think about training doctors and nurses in healthcare, other really specialized trades. You need that sort of mentor and apprentice experience for a lot of those. And it's changing not just in the US, but globally. Lorrie and John will be talking about this in their presentation next week, but it's happening across Asia Pacific. The EU is actually looking at changing some of its rules around mandatory retirement ages, things like that. So there's a lot changing across the globe too. And we're also seeing that older workers can be as productive or more so than their younger counterparts. They can maintain high productivity but reduce hiring and training costs. But 70% of the people we surveyed said that they have experienced ageism. And I think a lot of that has to do with confusion between what people want and what the company thinks they want. There's one stat that I heard Kevin Martin, our head of research, cite the other day about the fact that in one survey, they asked older workers what they need. The number one thing they said was a predictable schedule. So these older workers may not be working the extent of hours they did earlier in their career, but they want to be able to have a predictable schedule. The number one thing their employers thought they didn't want was healthcare. So it really kind of interesting mismatch between what these workers actually want and what the company thinks they need. So that part of that overtly courting is really making sure you understand what their needs are.
Yeah, it speaks to the importance of a strong listening strategy. We often, at least I often think listening strategy, oh, you got to listen to your new workers, your younger workers, but listening to all workers is what's key here, because you could otherwise have that kind of mismatch. Also, just wanted to note a few folks in the chat really chiming in, agreeing that ageism is real, that these demographics are going to be hitting us more and more in the years to come. So good stuff here. Thank you, Mollie.
And we do have some research on our website too that we did in partnership with the Age Friendly Institute. Yeah.
Yes.
That was recently published about a year ago that looked at some of the specifics around how to be a more age-friendly workplace.
I think also the other piece of that is the cultural implications. You know, it's the whole conversation about the multiple generations in the workplace has really kind of ebbed and flowed over the years. But I think we're going to hear more about that going forward. There are cultural implications. There are certainly internal and external implications. But speaking of Kevin Martin, Mollie, you reminded me, he showed me a story recently about L'Oreal Cosmetics, big global corporation. They're actually doing some advertising, sort of really tooting their own horn in terms of the percentage of their workforce that's over the age of 50. I saw like a huge full page ad by L'Oreal about really, hey, we are all about age diversification as well. So, you know, in the work that we do on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we really make a point to talk about and examine what is going on well beyond, you know, the usual default of let's talk about gender and race and ethnicity. So it's
Well, we talk so much about representation, right? You want to be, as a company, who your customers are, and women over 50 have long struggled to be seen, I think, in the marketplace. So to have them be seen in the marketplace where people work for an organization who values them, I think is really interesting.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think isn't it the key golden age demographic for advertisers is usually stated to be 18 to 54. That's usually the cutoff,
Right.
which I've
As the
always found interesting.
55-year-olds don't have any
Yeah.
Shop as
Well,
you
and
use their marketing value.
that's right. And AARP famously starts sending out things for membership at age 49 or 50. So
Which
Or
thrills
earlier.
everyone.
yeah, it's always a great milestone to reach. All right, let's move on. Lori, let's talk about our fourth and final prediction for 2025.
Sure. So risking stating the obvious about what is happening with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that the thing that I think is most important to acknowledge is that the story here is very complex. And it's also global. It is not, only about the US. And just acknowledging also the fact that we just have a confluence of internal and external tensions and issues that are affecting DE&I. And the story is unfolding in real time, as we all know, in recent months, weeks, and even days. So we've seen, big splashy stories in the media about DE&I policy and programming changes from Walmart, Toyota, McDonald's, and then just last week, Mark Zuckerberg's statement about what was going to be happening at Meta. So it's political and social pressure. So we all know that some critics of DE&I have talked a lot about the promotion of reverse discrimination or the exclusion of some people or some groups, or overreaching in terms of trying to address society inequities or issues. We also have in the US, certain states, certain regions have really put some restrictions through legislation in place, about DE&I training in public institutions. We know about the Supreme Court ruling with college admissions. We're also hearing a lot about internal pushback in organizations where, employees and even in some cases executives are just not seeing the alignment between DE&I initiatives and the company's overall goals. And I've been, in the room with some conversations with chief diversity officers recently where they're saying this is really an opportune time for us to sort of take a step back and look at historically the last several years, what has worked, what has been fruitful, what hasn't, where maybe could we have done things differently or could do things differently going forward. But also acknowledgement that some initiatives maybe weren't well thought through. There was a lot of let's rush and do this and really make positive things happen, but didn't end up with the outcome that they were hoping for. DE&I think also is up against, in addition to, just all of the noise out there in the media, implementation fatigue. I think these programs are difficult to launch and sustain without proper strategy and execution. That's definitely something that we've heard a lot about being a challenge. And then there's also been DE&I changes or all-out rollbacks that are being presented as, hey, this is a financial issue. It's an economic issue. We're cost cutting. And so this seems to be the right place in the organization to make some reductions. And we want to focus more on profitability than, things such as DE&I, ESG. So despite all of these factors and issues and pressures and tensions, I just want to remind everyone at I4CP, we are tracking in real time. We've got an internal log that we're sharing of all of the announcements, all of the public policies that we have been made aware of. It's not that long of a list. And by that, what I mean is that despite all of this, I think in most organizations, the work is continuing. The work is moving forward, but maybe more quietly or just differently than it has been in the past. So that's my long-winded way of saying that's
Don't
how
give
we're
up
looking
hope.
at that
Yeah,
prediction. Yes.
yeah. That is great. A great summary, Lori, of why we think the pressure is only going to intensify in the new year. And we will circle back to what various chief diversity officers, as represented by our CDO board, how they're prioritizing their work going forward. I was really impressed with the language they use for how they're tackling and still providing value going forward.
Yeah.
Your point about the internal list we've recently started up, I see a parallel between, yeah, the big headline grabbing organizations like the ones here, whether it's activist driven or internally driven or both, sort of similar to the big headlines that the RTO announcements get from some very big companies that make the big headlines and circulate around. And then when you really look at, okay, how many companies are really forcing a full 5-day-a-week return to office? It's not nearly all of them. So I think it's good to take that in consideration on both of those issues. All right, before we pivot to the various priorities of our 7 different boards, which is where we're going to go next, I do just want to remind everyone that all of this material is from our publicly available 2025 Priorities and Predictions report. I see a few folks joined us late and are wondering about the first couple of predictions. Maybe you're seeing this number 4 on the screen and wondering what were the first 3. So we will continue to put the link to download the report in the chat throughout the call today. But also just know if you're new to Next Practices Weekly, we record these calls and make the recording and the slides available very soon, within 48 hours after the close of the session. So watch for that in a follow-up email and just visit our website to find the full archive. All right, now let's pivot to the priorities from our 7 different boards. Each one of them gave us, I think, between 4 and 6 priorities for the new year based on both, as Lorrie said earlier, the qualitative understanding we have from discussions with the board members and the formal survey that we did of them during the September timeframe. For the Chief Human Resources Officer board, typically the leader of your HR function, Mollie, you work closely with this board as a researcher throughout the year. So why don't you tell us about this?
Sure, and there's 5 of them. They're all important. I just think it's important to also remember what priorities in general. There was a book probably 10, 12 years ago now called Essentialism, and it talks about how the word priority was only a singular in the English language until like 50 or 60 years ago. It didn't actually have a plural, and so people just started saying they had more than one priority, and by adding an S on the end of it, it was as if we could actually reorganize the way people think and structure work and have multiple priorities. So let's caution you against all that. These are all priorities. You may not be tackling all of them right now and probably be wise not to, but these are the top ones that we saw coming from that group. So just because we could stick an S on the end of it doesn't mean we have the organizational capacity.
That is a
to
great
take it
point,
on.
and something that I wish I could have had you explain to some former bosses of mine, where they had a long list of 12 priorities and they were all considered A priorities. So.
Priority 12A and
Yeah.
12C, right? Yeah. So for the Chief Human Resources Officers, the top priorities were ensuring HR is agile enough to stay tightly aligned with changes in enterprise strategy. This alignment and change management has been critical throughout history. Again, for CHROs, it's really key to the organization. And actually, it answers the top challenge that our CHRO board members cited, which over 70% of them said was the lack of agility. So this need for agility is also being combined with a noticeable lack of agility. So that's something that organizations are going to be looking at. Building or maintaining a healthy organizational culture. We actually launched sort of a relook at our culture research in the fall of last year and found that future-ready cultures were highly aligned with healthy cultures. So again, having a healthy culture also means you are change-ready, which speaks to the agility challenge as well. Ensuring strong pipelines for C-suite succession. Again, a perennial need for HR organizations. Using AI to accelerate business strategy execution and growth, and upskilling the workforce. So a lot of interesting priorities here. We'll go into a couple of them. If you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, I think we wanted you to drill in on this first one in a couple of ways.
Yeah, and many of you have seen before this people productivity chain. And one of the things that I think is important to realize about it is it's not just linear and it's not a circle. These things are constantly shifting at all times. And so you have to think about them as an entire system, which is balancing the market, what's happening in the market with your business strategy, the culture to support it, the leadership to guide you through it, the talent practices, and that's what yields productivity, right? It's not any one of those things, it's how you balance that whole system. And so using that, it's really important to remember that HR strategy and programs flex to address the strategic business and market shifts and remain in tight alignment with organizational strategy. And the CHROs recognize that critical to this is a greater capability within HR to identify and anticipate the needs of the business. So again, that tight alignment, but also the upskilling of the HR organization itself to be able to handle these changes. Alignment must integrate into the entire system. So we see here, this is actually like the third prediction, that ensuring that strong C-suite. In many ways, the priorities of the other boards help enable the priorities of the CHRO board, which makes sense, right? The CHRO has oversight, but then there's lots of these areas where there's deep expertise. So for the CHRO, if the priority is ensuring strong pipelines. The CLTO has to be looking at increasing manager effectiveness in the face of complex demands. The CDO has to be promoting and embedding inclusive policies, practices, and habits. The future of work board has to be building a future-ready culture and workforce, which again is highly correlated to a healthy culture. The total rewards leaders have to be thinking about aligning rewards to organizational outcomes. Talent acquisition has to be thinking about improving mobility, and workforce planning needs to be looking at how they model as well. So it really is about, again, you can't just shift one or focus on one of these. You have to manage them as a system and how they all come together to drive organizational productivity.
Yeah, this is a nice example of where that first priority noted for the CHRO board, a focus on agility and alignment, can really, it's sort of a meta priority that really applies to all the other ones that followed, including, as you said, the third one, focusing on a strong pipeline for succession. So very nice.
Absolutely.
All right, well, very good. That was the top priorities for the CHRO board. Why don't we take a look now at the priorities of our talent acquisition leaders? And Lorrie, you've long worked with this board. Mollie, go ahead.
So I just wanted to address two comments in the chat. So agility to do what, or agility in what way? Sorry, Lorrie, didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that's an important point. Is about agility to manage to change. We're in a really interesting situation right now where we know change is coming, but we can't quite predict what it's going to be. So that ability to be agile and resilient and build that healthy culture where there's trust and understanding where the organization is going, that's what we mean by the agility. So it's not necessarily, we don't know what we're going to need to be agile to quite yet. And we're going to have to plan in some ambiguity right now as an organization, but it's about that ability to manage change and develop a culture that's change ready and resilient.
Good. Yeah, thank you for picking up on that from the chat. And I'll note Kamuti's question in the chat. Yes, again, the slides will be available, as will the recording, probably within around 48 hours after we conclude today. All right, now, as I was saying, Lorrie, you have long worked with talent acquisition leaders. You attend the TA board meetings, and so walk us through these if you would.
Happy to. So I want to salute talent acquisition folks everywhere, because this group of professionals has always been on the front line in terms of, experimenting with, really taking the leap with new technologies. Talent acquisition has really been on the front line with AI adoption and figuring out what is this going to look like? How is this going to affect the function? What is this going to mean for our organization? And even what is it going to mean for the structure of the talent acquisition function? Those are conversations that are happening in all of the organizations that we work with. But I guess in terms of further leveraging technology, what I will say the leaders on our talent acquisition board have told us is that, automation, including AI and enablement, via technology, has been part of TA for a long while. The rapid evolution of generative AI in particular is really shaking things up. It's making considerable impact on really driving considerable improvements in efficiencies and effectiveness, better quality candidates, really figuring out where out there in the world to reach and how to adjust that messaging depending on, the groups of talent pools you're trying to connect with, and really enhancing employer brand. And this is just only going to continue to accelerate in 2025. Most of our talent acquisition board members told us that they are definitely planning and allocating funding to expand the use of AI, and they are viewing it as just an absolutely vital piece of their function's ability to deliver on what the company needs to achieve in 2025. So then moving into enhancing TA efficiency through process optimization, obviously expanding adoption of AI is helping to deliver high-level consistent results around the world. And this board in particular is very global. These are Fortune 500 companies, but all of them have global footprints. So it's really interesting to hear when they get together and share information, what is happening in different parts of the world. There's definitely acknowledgement, and I think this is really important that we keep reminding ourselves that this adoption of AI and all this technology and the new stuff that seems to be rolling out every day requires an artful balance of, yes, high tech, let's embrace it, let's use it where it makes sense and in ways that make sense. And while chatbots can certainly improve just the retention of an applicant through the whole process and keep those candidates engaged, that's fantastic. the human element is absolutely vital to all of this. It's vital to, making those really important and meaningful human connections and ultimately sealing the deal. I don't know about any of you, but I think I'm more likely to accept an offer from a human being than a chatbot. So that balance, I think striking the balance and figuring out what that looks like for different organizations is something that a lot of our board members, companies are working on. And then elevating skills within the TA function. We've been talking about this for a couple of years as things with AI have been evolving. And there's been wide acknowledgement that the talent acquisition function is changing and evolving. I know a couple of years ago, I first started hearing about, well, TA really needs to be positioned to be more strategic advisors to the business. We need to be more part of succession and internal talent, movement and all of those things. I've been hearing a lot about it for the last couple of years. Now I'm really starting to see it. And I think that AI, the advancement of this technology, is really offering more opportunities for organizations to really actually make these things happen. So influence, strategic consulting skills, these are all going to be more important to TA. People who aspire to leadership in TA, it's going to be really, really important to not lose sight of just how critical those soft skills are. So yes, adoption of AI is awesome, but don't lose sight of how important it is to develop those soft skills, and tight partnership with your internal partners, really important. And then what is the last one? Leveraging data. Again, advancing AI is really offering an opportunity for talent acquisition to look at data, make decisions that are more data driven, really being able in real time to look at the metrics like source of hire, candidate quality, what's happening with retention, 30, 60, 90 days, what's happening with turnover, and what is happening out there in the external markets. It's really helping TA recruiters and sourcers really refine their efforts and proactively be part of the planning and looking, 1, 3, and 5 years out in terms of, what do we need to be doing? What do we need to be thinking about? It's also been really helpful in terms of identifying the process log jams. The other thing that I'm hearing more about from the talent acquisition leaders on our board is that they are forging very tight partnerships with their people analytics teams and leaders, and working in tandem with a lot of these initiatives. So leverage your internal partners. The people analytics folks in your organization can be your best friends in TA and HR, but I think those partnerships are going to be really fruitful as we continue to embrace whatever comes next with AI.
Wow, great insights from all the time you spend with our TA board leaders. So appreciate that, Lorrie. We didn't set up any polls for the call today, but I thought I would try one experiment with the chat since we've got so many folks on the line. Of these 5 priorities for TA in 2025, pick one, just indicate the number in the chat. I know it'll probably fly by quickly if enough of you respond. Which one's most important at your organization? I'm just curious, sort of an informal poll. We'll get a sense of this based on the numbers as they fly by. So I'm seeing 5s and 4s. So internal mobility, leveraging data, a lot of focus on internal mobility. That's interesting. It's been a trend in recent years.
But does that resonate with anybody that we've been talking about it a lot, but we're finally starting to see some movement with that? I'm hoping that's a trend.
I think that might be what they're suggesting. We've been talking about it a lot, and now it's finally a priority for 2025 to actually make some headway.
Yeah,
that would make sense. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Appreciate that.
Tom, I just want to say one more thing. Along with the priorities, they're in complete alignment, and everybody, you can download the report and read more about this, but we do talk about what our TA leaders are predicting for the future. And the one that I think is the most fascinating is in the evolution of AI, agentic AI agents that can learn, they can reason. This technology can make decisions and take action on those decisions. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what that happens with, how that all manifests in TA.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Lorrie, I've been thinking about this question for a couple of years now. What happens when you have an AI generated interview, our job posting with an AI generated interview guide that's responded to by an AI generated resume, and the interview is done, and someone's using AI to actually respond to voice prompts over a video interview, right? I mean, that
Right.
level of abstraction is so interesting to think about how we're going to manage that.
It's exciting and terrifying all at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah, I actually predict that we've done several studies on automation and AI, actually going back many, many years now, but certainly in the past 2 years. I think our next one probably will be on the pros and cons of agentic AI in HR, and
Yeah,
because as you're suggesting, there are pros and cons to it.
for sure.
All right, let's move on. We've got about 20 minutes left, and we want to cover the priorities from our other boards. I'll tackle this one. I'm the member of our research team that works most closely with our Chief Learning and Talent Officer Board, which, by the way, is composed of about 1/3 Chief Learning Officers, about 2/3 broader Chief Talent Officers. It's a really interesting mix of about 50 organizations. Some of the things here that you see on the list on the screen are sort of evergreen topics that continue to be priorities in the new year. So the third one, building or maintaining a healthy organizational culture. The fifth one related to that, specifically within culture, establishing or improving their learning culture. I would say those make this list pretty much every year. The new one that sort of crept up to number one for the CLTO board leaders is increasing manager effectiveness. So it's a subset of number two, broader upskilling of the workforce, but really focusing on managers, the first level supervisors, the managers of managers, and really anyone up through, say, senior director, not including, though, your executive level leadership development. Leadership development, of course, at any given organization might be a number one priority if you're relooking at your leadership development program for that year. But what we found across most members of this board was that really focusing in on manager effectiveness was key in this new year. Managers have been given a lot more responsibilities, even prior to the pandemic, but certainly since 2020, to focus on employee well-being, DE&I requirements and expectations, new technology, all the things we've been talking about so far on this call. And it's in a lot of organizations, they're seeing sort of a burnout increase amongst managers, and maybe a dip in their capabilities, their effectiveness as managers. And so many organizations focusing on that in the new year with new training programs, new other non-training support mechanisms. It's really something that, as it says, in the face of complex and increasing demands, is a big focus. And then, of course, you see AI listed as well, leveraging AI to enhance learning. A lot of organizations have already dove into this. Our research consistently shows that talent acquisition and learning and development are the two areas of HR that have used AI sort of out of the gate in the past couple of years, most often in the most diverse ways. That's going to continue in the new year for these leaders. All right, let's move on to Chief Diversity Officers. So sort of circling back to that fourth prediction from earlier. And Lorrie, if we could have you speak to these, that would be great.
Sure. I think we've already addressed, tangentially some of this, but just a reiteration that while we've seen plenty of headlines and in some cases quite hyperbolic headlines about organizations making changes to DE&I, the fact is, and our research has shown this, we did a big survey. I think we had about 1,000, maybe a little over 1,000 leaders take this survey a year ago this month, asking about what's happening with DE&I, and the overwhelming majority said, yeah, the work continues. We may be refining, we may be making adjustments. One of those adjustments looks like some organizations are doing simple things like renaming some of their initiatives, renaming their employee resource groups to business resource groups, maybe some small adjustments here and there, but the work continues. So strengthening DE&I strategies to assure alignment and organizational goals. Again, this is input from our Chief Diversity Officer Board, and we have over 50 Chief Diversity Officers that sit on this board. I think about half of them, right around half of them, told us that they're definitely prioritizing the integration of DE&I and belonging into the fundamental business strategy. So they are working with the rest of the C-suite to ensure that everything that they're doing is really with the aim of fostering improved workplace culture, driving innovation, engaging employee experience, and ultimately boosting business performance. So part of that is promoting and embedding inclusive leadership practices and habits, really talking about this is what it looks like. And for some organizations, they don't even talk about diversity or inclusion or belonging. They talk about it in terms of who are we as an organization? who do we aspire to be? What is our culture all about? And really grounding all of this in mutual respect and trust, and maybe getting away from some of the language that, depending on the culture of that organization, may be really distracting and, hot button that just derails conversations that otherwise could be really productive. So shoring up inclusiveness in the organizations and cultures, working to expand access to DE&I offerings, making sure that allyship opportunities are something that they're talking about organization-wide to really help shore up the culture of the organization and making sure that it's future ready, which is, what all of our member companies want to be, is prepared for the future. So you can't be all that prepared for the future and what's ahead if you have a homogeneous workforce. We all know that. And again, building cultures, we know from all of the culture research that we've done, including, a best-selling book our CEO published about healthy corporate cultures, that, the tone is set from the top, but we also know that inclusion and trust and belonging is happening every day to day interaction, within teams, within, partnerships with internally in the organization. So ensuring that everyone understands what the rules of engagement are. We talk about this a lot in terms of effective teamwork. What does that look like? What are the rules of engagement? What are the expected behaviors? Just really articulating that, making it very clear, and ensuring that everyone feels safe. And then finally, retention, attraction of diverse talent, yes, but also retaining that talent once you get it in the door. And this is something that we all have experienced, we've all observed, and definitely in our own research we have seen, is all of these efforts to attract the talent that you need. If they come into the organization and don't see a culture or an environment that they feel comfortable in, that they feel welcome in, that, there's going to be space made for them, they're not going to stick around. So the importance of diverse talent and really making sure that everyone feels that they belong. And when I say diverse, I mean all of us. We're talking age, gender, race, ethnicity, but abilities, experiences, all of the things. So we need to take some of the narrow view that we're seeing out there and make sure that we're widening the view in the conversation. And then finally, just making sure that DE&I practices, whatever those look like for each organization, because every organization has a unique DNA and a unique culture, but really staying the course, maintaining focus, making sure everybody understands what you're doing and why you're doing it. And this, again, I think is part of the conversation that we're hearing with DE&I leaders, is that we really need to take a step back and look at the communication and the messaging and ensuring that we're explaining what we're doing and why. So that's it. So I'll stop there.
As I said earlier, when you were talking about the fourth prediction that was DE&I focused, I really like the wording of these, given the challenges that DE&I leaders are facing. And this really, I think, is representative of DE&I efforts across a lot of organizations. As you mentioned, this board has around 50 members. I think it's our largest board, or it's certainly one of the top 3. We sometimes have some internal competition to see which board can maintain that title. So certainly DE&I is still very relevant in 2025, if nothing else, just based on the size of this board. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I would just say my final note on DE&I is don't be discouraged. If you're feeling discouraged, don't be discouraged. I think that there's a lot of positive things that can happen going forward. And I think this is definitely an opportunity to sort of do some retrospective. What have we done in the past that was super effective, or maybe what could we have done differently, and move ahead.
All right, we've got 3 boards left in about 8 or 9 minutes. So let's hit on these so we don't leave any functional areas of HR out. Future of work leaders. Mollie, can you speak to this?
Sure. The future work leaders have 6 priorities. They have more to do than all the other groups. But really, when you look at these priorities, a lot of them are very supportive of and operationalizing of other goals. And this is our newest board here at I4CP. It's interesting as we debate about this, whether or not we would launch this, because certainly CHROs are very conscious of the future of work and other organizational leaders. but it's become so much rapid change in the near term and longer term. We felt like it deserved its own focus. And we're seeing more and more roles at the top of the organization really look at its future work. So these first two priorities, advancing AI skills of employees and leaders and operationalizing and scaling AI across the enterprise, we've heard those talked about in a lot of the other priority lists, right? So it's really the future work, though, is really they have to support and guide and really put some goals out there around those AI efforts. The next two, changing culture to fully leverage a skills-based approach, very similar to what Tom was talking about with the CLO board. Um, Deconstructing jobs and redesigning work for future task automation. We talked about this a little bit at the beginning, where we're expecting people to identify parts of their job that they can stop doing, but then building the psychological safety internally to say to your boss, okay, this is what I'm not doing. What else should I and can I be doing? And so again, that's building that safety, that culture to say, if you identify part of your job that it can be done by AI, it doesn't mean you're going to eliminate you as a person who works at this company. It means it's going to evolve your responsibilities. And these last two, building a future ready culture and workforce, again, future ready and healthy are very, very tightly aligned. So when you think about how do you create a future ready culture and a healthy culture, it's really important to focus on building that trust. When you have that trust and that joint feeling of effort, it's a lot easier to steer the ship in new directions because people believe in where you're going. And then continuing to improve employee well-being. We cannot emphasize this enough. We came out of the pandemic and we swung from empathy to productivity, and now we're swinging back a little bit. We need to find that middle ground where we can focus on well-being of individuals and managers in order to make sure we have the people to execute. We have the best product, the best strategy. Without the people to execute it, we aren't going to get anywhere.
Yeah, well said. And I would just like to put a plug for this board, if I could, for just a quick second. This is, as you said, our newest board. It's still growing rather rapidly. Obviously, small organizations probably don't have a designated future of work leader, but organizations of a certain size and larger do. And if this was news to you that we have this board, if you know of someone in your organization who is a future of work leader designated as such, whether they have that exact title or something similar, we'd love to hear from them. We'd love to talk to them about maybe joining this board. All right, we have two left. I'm going to touch on the top priorities from our people analytics board leaders. Again, tends to be more larger organizations that have a people analytics function with a designated people analytics leader. So delivering customized insights to business leaders. Also, number three, enhancing reporting and visualization tools to help tell the story a little bit better that comes out of the data, making it customized to those leaders, but also enhanced with more stories, more visualization, providing more meaningful insights to really connect with the business goals, trying to move away from being the reporting function and getting into predictive analytics, more storytelling. That's what our people analytics leaders are telling us that they've been doing, I would say, for the past couple of years and are really going to double down on in 2025. Of course, implementing AI and machine learning tools. If any functional area of HR is well suited to be upskilled in this area, it's probably your people analytics leaders, being the most tech focused. Not surprising to see that on this list. And then HR data integration and systems interoperability. We have this conversation a lot with our people analytics board leaders. The HR tech stack at most large organizations is complicated, sometimes maybe overly so, convoluted. Getting all of that information into, say, a data lake or some other enterprise-wide area that has the right security mechanisms, but also allows for the data to be seen by AI and by human eyes to get out those insights into a storyline that makes sense for leaders. That's also seen as a key priority for this new year. All right, and then to bring us home, Lorrie, if you could speak to our Total Rewards Leaders Board.
Sure. So not a big surprise for anyone on this call, I'm sure. Those Total Rewards leaders on that board told us they're going to really focus in earnest on enhancing internal communications, which we all know often falls short. Or if you've ever sat through a annual open enrollment all company call, sometimes it's kind of hard to follow. So overuse of jargon, explanations that are super complex and not succinct, and personal messaging. So some of the strategies that we've heard about from members of our Total Rewards Board are, again, leveraging AI, opening two-way communication channels that allow employees to ask questions in real time and get those responses outside of like the open enrollment meetings. So this is something that some of our board members are already leveraging AI for with great results. Identifying and optimizing the ROI of comp and bends. This includes digging into both quantitative and qualitative metrics and really understanding what your employees want, where they're satisfied, what's really lacking, what they are saying they really, really need to enable them to be fully present at work. And a lot of times it's just things like, you know, childcare subsidies, family care subsidies, maybe ramping up your investment in well-being. So just really understanding what it is that your employees need and what resonates with them. And to that end, personalization. I mentioned earlier, we've got 5 generations in the workforce. That requires a lot of flexibility in the benefits packages that you're offering. So including really broad menus, allowing people to select what works best for them and prioritize what matters most to them. So personalization is really important. It's going to continue to be important going forward. And again, incorporating AI for predictive analytics or personalization. We've already talked about that a little bit on this call, but I think that this again is something that total rewards leaders are going to be really pressing on in 2025. And then finally, ensuring that your incentive structures are driving meaningful contributions toward key business goals. It's just really obvious, but sometimes that just the focus on that sort of falls by the wayside. So total rewards leaders can work closely with their performance management teams to make sure that they're linking bonuses and merit raises to the achievement of specific KPIs. I know it sounds obvious and getting back to basics, but there's so much noise going on that it's really easy to lose sight of that. So that's it. You can read more in the report.
Yeah, that was a lot, more so than most
Yeah.
Next Practices Weekly. I know we went quickly through a lot of very broad-ranging things. I hope this was helpful for everyone. As we said, and as we've provided in the chat, these slides, the recording, and the report, which in this case is fully public, all available to everyone. I want to thank the two of you, Lorrie and Mollie. This was a lot to prep for. A lot of work goes into this report every year. Great job sharing the insights that you did.
Well,
Thank
I
you,
want to
Tom.
thank everyone for being here, for being so engaged in the chat. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, the chat was great. We really appreciate that.
And actually, I want to take a moment and give an added thank you to a lot of other folks at I4CP that goes into this particular study each year. The 3 of us, but we have some colleagues on the research team that also work closely with our boards. They're involved, the board chairs, all of the board members. And I'd also like to call out you personally, Lorrie. You said at the top of the hour that this is the sort of project that maybe you enjoy the most each year. This is you shepherd this through the process at I4CP, and it wouldn't be what it is without your efforts. So I just want to recognize that more directly.
Thanks, Thomas. It takes a village, the whole research team. It was a big group effort for sure.
All right, in our final minute, I want to just remind everyone coming up fast because it's earlier in March this year than most years. We have our Next Practices Now I4CP 2025 conference. You see here just a small sampling of some of the speakers. No vendors, no expo hall at this conference. It's a very highly rated, often the highest rated HR conference in the industry. If you haven't signed up yet, you can still do so. Hotel rooms are booking up fast, so I'd encourage you to do so as soon as you can. i4cp.com/conference, and you see the QR code there as well. And lastly, as Zeta has already put over in the chat, all Next Practice Weekly sessions are available for recertification credit hours with both HRCI and SHRM. The program ID and activity ID change from week to week. So here they are on screen, and they were also available over in the chat. Once again, thanks everyone. Great participation today. Thanks again, Lorrie, Mollie, Zeta, and Matt for your support on this particular call, and hope to see everyone back again next week. Bye-bye now.